and he has given an interesting introduction to himself. It has big words, so bear with me. Luke Carbis is a self-deputised open source emissary and vigilante plenipotentiary for WordPress proletariat affairs. He works closely with WordPress-based startups like BlockLab to fast-track their growth and inspire beautiful written code. Handing over to Luke.
Thank you so much, Filipita. Plenipotentiary for WordPress proletariat affairs, yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. It was actually at Wordcamp Sydney exactly 1 year ago that I was standing on stage, actually in the other building. I was giving a talk about Gutenberg when I had this great idea for a product. Actually, someone in the audience around this area during the Q&A time put their hand up and said, so I was talking about Gutenberg, it hadn't been released yet. I was sort of talking about get ready for it, it's coming out soon. And they said, I use advanced custom fields and have a particular workflow that I use for all my client sites. How is that going to work with Gutenberg? And I said, I don't know. But that inspired a thought. I sort of realized maybe there's an opportunity here for a product, right? Maybe there should be something out there for WordPress that lets you create custom blocks just as easy as ACF lets you create custom meta. So today, in my talk, I'm going to talk to you about that story, about how BlockLab came to be. We launched, we've got a whole bunch of customers, we've got a bunch of press, all of that sort of thing. It's been quite a successful journey since that day at WordCamp Sydney last year. So I'm going to talk about that story, and along the way, I'm going to give you 3 ideas, 3 sort of tools in my toolbox that I used that worked out really, really well for me. Now, of course, not everything that I tried on BlockLab worked out well, but these 3 things really, I think, contributed quite a lot to the success of the product. So let me just give you a bit of background about myself. I've been in WordPress for a very long time, maybe 12 years or so. And in 2014, I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to join a plugin startup called Stream. And Stream was this plugin that tracked all of the admin activity that happens in WordPress, kept a log of it, and it did really well. We launched version 1. I sort of was one of the lead developers on that, and then we started working on version 2. I moved into like this product management role, still doing a bit of development, and then after version 2, we got acquired, which was fantastic, right? We got acquired by this big agency. They're one of the VIP agencies called XWP. And they're sort of distributed WordPress agency around the world, work with a lot of enterprise clients. And I moved into a leadership position there as Director of Product and Innovation. And in that role, I got to experiment a lot with product. I got to try a lot of things that didn't work. I got to do a lot of sort of online courses. I did Seth Godin's Alt MBA. And I also started this thing called Tide. And Tide was this product that would scan WordPress.org and look at all the plugins and themes and identify coding standards issues, security vulnerabilities, performance optimization opportunities. And a couple of years ago at WordCamp US, I sat in a room with Matt Mullenweg and negotiated the acquisition of Tide into WordPress.org. So now if you want to learn about Tide, it's part of the WordPress project. You can go to WordPress.org/Tide. That was a really exciting time for me. Shortly after that, I was at XWP helping with the contributor team who was contributing back into WordPress core. I was sort of helping to manage all of our Gutenberg contributions. And that's how I ended up on stage at WordCamp Sydney, talking about Gutenberg. So now you know that story. And at this point, when this idea happened, it took me maybe a month to get there, but I actually left my job at XWP to work on this new idea. And you already have a bit of an idea of what it is. It lets you create custom blocks within the WordPress admin in a similar way to how ACF works. And we called that plugin Block Lab. Okay, so now you've got the backstory. So I want to introduce to you a few ideas, let's see here, that I used along the way. And these are ideas I've been developing over time. Let's start with this one. Maybe you can zoom out. No, I'm sure there's a way of zooming, but anyway. Is there someone with the answers? I don't know. Ah, got it. There we go. I may as well just show you. Oh, yeah, there we go. We'll do that. All right. Don't go Googling PP pyramid because you'll get like a bunch of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So these are ideas that I have been just messing around with in my head, all right? So over that journey between Stream and Block Lab, I've been experimenting with a bunch of different ideas, and I've never told anyone. I've told a couple of people. I never sort of published them, never talked about them before. But with Block Lab, it was really exciting because I got to try and put them into practice. Some of the ideas didn't work. Here's 3 that did. I want to tell you about them, and maybe there can be something that'll work for you. Pyramid. So I had this idea on stage. Put your hand up if you also have had a good product idea before. Most of the room, except for you. Oh, no, you have? All right, good. Yeah, so the bottom of the pyramid is a product. That actually, you know, a lot of people treat products pretty seriously. You know, a lot of people that, like I've had clients, maybe you have before, who are like, oh, got this thing I want you to work on for me, but you got to sign an NDA because I don't want anyone else to find out about it. But the truth is, product ideas happen all the time. They're actually really easy to come by. There's the old saying, I guess it's not that old, that you should treat your product ideas like cattle, not like pets, right? Because you should be able to easily get rid of them if they're not a good fit. All right, so that's a product idea. The next thing that you need, which is a little bit harder to get when you're thinking about launching a product, is you need the right place. And I don't necessarily mean geographically. Depending on the product, that might be important. But you need the right place in terms of your industry, maybe a bit of your reputation, the people that you know, all right? So if you're, I don't know, so take me, I'm really involved in WordPress, you know, web publishing, that sort of thing. I could have the greatest idea right now for guitar studio or a mining improvement, but I don't know anyone in that space, yeah? I don't have any connections, so, you know, a lot of people try and pursue ideas that aren't really related to what they already know, and I think more often than not, those ideas aren't successful because you don't have the right place. And place also is a place in time. So I was thinking about this idea that I had at Wordcamp Sydney, and I thought, is it the right place? Well, certainly it's the right place for me. I know a lot about Gutenberg. I've got some friends in WordPress. But is it the right place in time? And I realized, yeah, Gutenberg's not even out yet a year ago. It's coming soon. We could be first to market. We could be there when it launches, right? It's the right place and time. So to all of you who've had a good product idea before, maybe try and filter that and think, that product idea, was it in my niche? Was it in my industry? And also, was it before its time, maybe? Or maybe it was a bit late to market, all right? So that sort of narrows the field for a lot of product ideas. Do you know what I mean? Do you agree? So the next thing that's important, and the absolute hardest to find, is you need the right people. And people is hard because not only do you need the right skill sets to be able to pull this thing off, but you need 3 people, or I'll tell you about why 3 people in a second, but you need people who'll work together, who'll form a good team, and even harder, you need people who are able to sort of put time towards your idea, right? Put time towards this new product, people who can invest themselves. So many talented people are already so busy, so it's really, really difficult to find the people you need to launch a product. That's why it's the top of the pyramid. If you can find those people, you're onto a winner. Actually, I just had an idea. I haven't okayed this with anyone, but I noticed that there's a hallway spot at 11-ish. I'm going to hang out there at 11, and if anybody wants to come and join me, we could sort of work our way backwards through here, and we might be able to find a group of people who could, depending on their individual skill sets and industries, we could figure out what a good place, what a good area to work on is, and then think about what a product idea might be. Now, that's not what I did for Block Lab, but I reckon working backwards might make a lot of sense. So I'm going to be there around 11 if anybody wants to come and hang out with me, and maybe we can figure something out there. So after Wordcamp Sydney, must have been a Monday, I was in the Sydney airport, and I'd been just chewing over this idea, right? I couldn't get it out of my head. I knew I had a good product idea. I knew I had the right place. We'll talk about validation, or maybe we won't, because validation is a whole nother talk, but I just had this really strong gut feeling I was onto something, but I thought, can I get the people? All right, because that's the hardest part. So I give my mate Rob a call. He's a marketing guy, and he says, yeah, that's amazing, I'm in. I give a couple of other people a call, and don't have the time. I give Reynard a call. He's one of the best developers I know, and tell him the idea, and he says, that sounds amazing. And I realized then that I had the right subset of people for my indie founder Zen-Ven diagram. So this is another idea that I've been toying with, and it just, this for us worked incredibly well. And I say indie here because I'm not talking about some startup that is going to get VC investment and 100x, all right? I'm talking about the sort of startup that is going to do, the long-term vision is 1 to 10 mil, and if it does more than that, fantastic, and maybe that's 5 years away. That sort of size of a startup. Like an indie startup, right? So that's what I was building. And I believe that you need 3 people to start, to have a real good shot at an indie startup. You need 3 founders, okay? And these 3 founders have each got to have their own separate skill set. So, as for me, I put myself in the product role. All right, so I call myself a product designer, at least in this sense. Now, you want a product designer because you need someone who's going to understand the customer, right, going to understand a bit of UX and understand how things should work, understand the industry broadly. It's going to be able to bring that sort of thing to the table. Okay? This is a person who might even design some of the interfaces, right? So do a bit of UI design. Pretty important, wouldn't you agree? To have someone who understands your customer and your industry. All right, understands what the product is fundamentally, what it ought to do, understands the vision for the product, all of that sort of thing. Then, of course, you need like a technical lead, an engineer, a programmer, someone who can actually build the thing, and you can't do it without that technical person, right? So wouldn't you agree that that person is equally important? And now, with these 2 people, you might get a product, but there's no point in having a product if nobody knows about it, if you're not making any sales. So you need, equally as important, a sales, marketing person. And depending on what your startup is, you might be more heavily towards sales or maybe more towards marketing. And the trick here of what works really well is to have a bit of overlap between these roles, if possible. So, yeah, I'm a product designer, but I'm not always the best, maybe with visual design. Our marketing guy, Rob, he has got a bit of an eye for visual design, so him and I could work more closely together there. You know, the technical lead, maybe they've got a bit of a Twitter following or something like that. They can be good on a sales call or in a podcast, and so they've got a little bit of that marketing. You know, and the product designer understands a bit of the technical. You understand a bit of overlap between these three roles. And why 3 people? Because one person, even if they're successful, nobody's going to enjoy working for like the dictator. And actually, more often than not, one person, you're going to be pretty lonely, all right? So you lose that zen. It's not as exciting. It's not as easy to get by. 2 people, yeah, you could make it work, maybe. But the moment you have a disagreement, you got a 50-50 split, and you can't get along, and things get sticky, and you lose your zen, right? 3 people, you got the tiebreaker. 4 people, you lose your tiebreaker. 5 people, you're splitting your shares too much. You don't want that. You want to keep as much as possible. Does that make sense? All right, so that's the indie founder Zen Ven. So I'm on the phone to Reynard in the airport. The flight is boarding, and he's going, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I say to Reynard, look, I can't talk much longer, but do you think we could build a prototype in 1 week? And he gave what every technical person's response to that is, which is, hell no, I couldn't do that. I said, yeah, but what if we just had 1 week to work on this? What could we build? So what I had in mind here was a prototype. And you know, in the product world, the big 3-letter acronym that you hear all the time is MVP, all right? I hate that. You ask any product person worth their salt, and they'll tell you MVP is the most misused, most misapplied, corporatized term. It's a waste of time because nobody understands what viable is. Nobody understands what the minimum is, all right? So what I prefer to use is let's build a prototype. And a prototype, it just does 2 things. One, it proves that technically this can be built. It's achievable technically, okay? We've got a technical path to make whatever we're building happen. 2, it replaces your pitch deck, okay? Pitch decks are boring. Slides, I hate them. Instead, give someone something that's interactive. When you want to get buy-in, when you want to get validation from your customer base or your market, instead of saying, oh, here's this idea, what do you think, would you buy it, and showing them a slide deck, give them something that they can install themselves. Give them something they can use and get a feel for. And the feedback might be, it's not quite there. It needs this feature and it needs that feature, but I can see potential, right? That's the feedback that you're looking for. And so with a prototype, it's just a replacement for that other validation method. So we went with this 3rd option, which is the early access launch plan. So I was kind of inspired by what I've seen a lot of games do on Steam. Is anyone a gamer? Nobody, okay. Well, a lot of games, what they'll do is they'll release an early version, you pay less for it, and you get access to it sooner, and then they continue to iterate. And it's a great idea because you're getting money sooner, and more importantly, you're getting validation sooner. You know, everyone in product will always tell you that you can get you can ask 1,000 people in the room, you could ask, would you buy this product? And maybe 900 of them will say, yeah, sure, I'll buy that product. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then you say, all right, here's a terminal, give me your credit card number. It costs $30, and then you'll only get 10, right? Because there's a huge difference between someone saying, yeah, I like that, and actually forking out some money for it. So my idea here was we want to get people invested into the idea as early as possible. That's how we know that we're onto something, So we started with a prototype, and we built that in 1 week, okay? And at that point, at the 1 week mark, we put it on WordPress.org. We're going to explore a freemium model. So we knew that we were going to have a free and a premium. And so we took that, we took the free, we're going to release the free version of it straight away on WordPress.org. And that's what we did. And it was rough, okay? And because we were inspired by advanced custom fields, we called it advanced custom blocks, right? Makes sense. We put it out there and started to get some feedback. And I posted about it in WP Australia. Is anyone on the WP Australia Slack? You should be. If you're involved in WordPress day-to-day, get on that Slack. It's an amazing community. And so I posted about it there, asked for some feedback. A lot of feedback started coming in, a lot of positive feedback. D. Teal said to me, oh, I don't know about the name. The name's a bit derivative. Maybe you could come up with something else. And so I went back to the guys. Actually, this is why having 3 people was really helpful, because I said, I like advanced custom blocks. I think we should keep it. And the other 2, they said, yeah, I don't know. And I said, no, really, this is my idea. I think it's right, And they said, no, we should change it. We're going to change it. All right, so I got overruled, which is a great thing. You need people to disagree with you. And I'm so glad I did, because I think it would have been a bad mistake to make. All right, so we launched this 1 week, starting to get positive feedback. The next 3 months, this is what we did. We made a list of every feature we wanted in the Pro and every feature we wanted in the free, and we just worked on the free stuff, okay? So we started getting that out. We were releasing updates, we're fixing things, we're addressing technical debt for 3 months. Now, I should say, we're doing this part-time, okay? We're doing this like 1 day a week. There's 3 of us. Reynard left early on. We found another one to replace him, Ryan. I started thinking about changing my name to something that starts with an R. And we continued to iterate on the free version to get it sort of up to speed where we'd be really happy with it over the course of 3 months. At the 3-month point, we had a solid free plugin. We looked at our list of what are the premium plugins that we want to, premium features that we want to release. And we said, all right, this one feature is going to be easy to make and pretty valuable. So we'll create a premium version, and we'll have it with just that one feature out of all of them, right? And during these 3 months, we also developed a website, did the social media stuff, emails, and we launched what we called an early access version. So right here, we got the prototype launch. Oop. And over here, we got early access. So now we put up our website and we start directing people, through the marketing channels to go check out our early access version. And the sell was pretty simple. We'll give it to you cheap. In fact, we'll give it to you lifetime cheap. Okay, we're going to give you 70% off, and no matter what the price is, every year, because we've got a recurring yearly subscription, we're going to give you 70% off every year because you backed us early, because you believed in the project, okay? That's a very, very compelling model to a lot of people. And what else we said? You'll get access to the premium features as we develop them. So then we're able to work on the premium features, and as we did that, we released updates to the Pro plugin, and they got one feature at a time, right, over the course of this premium sort of phase. And of course, a lot of work sort of went back into the free plugin, a lot of like bug fixes and maintenance updates and things like this. So we're working on both during these 6 months, and still just a day a week, all right? But what happens is we start getting sales. We start getting money in because people are starting to buy the early access version, all right? And it's a great model because what happened then is I could work a whole day a week and get paid for it, and still putting in a lot of my time for free, but I'm starting to get paid for this product now that doesn't actually have a full premium version yet. We start to make a bit more money out of this early access, and we're iterating on the feature set. So we get towards the end of this 6 months, and we're getting ready to do like the full pro launch. There was one more feature that we wanted to develop. We knew it was going to need a big push. We had enough money by this point to easily cover the expenses of flying Ryan in. He lives in Mexico, so we flew him to Brisbane. The three of us rented a place on the Sunshine Coast by the beach, and for a week, we just hacked at the plugin. We all took a week off work, right? And for just a week, we worked on the last feature of the pro version, all right? And we spent just a small portion of the money that we'd made during the early access. We also, during this time, employed someone to write technical documentation, which is a gap that we had. Nobody really likes running technical documentation. And we started to get docs up, which are really important. And we spent this week, we sponsored WordCamp Brisbane with the money that we'd made from the early access, and we launched Pro. As soon as we launch, the sale disappears, right, and we launch at the full price. And we've got a product now. We've got a product on the market that's been around for a while, and it was around early. It was one of the very first ones, right? It was around even before Gutenberg launched, because we launched it straight away, right at the prototype phase, and it's gotten better and better over time. Does that make sense? So this model has worked extraordinarily well for us. And I don't think I've seen it anywhere in WordPress before. I think it works well enough that other people should give it a shot. I want to make a point about how we did the technical side of licensing the plugin. So first of all, we're using easy digital downloads on our website. So we're running our website, selling it with EDD. I don't really like WooCommerce because of all of the nags and install Jetpack, and it seems like really heavy, and it just seems overkill. We're not shipping to anyone, so EDD seemed like a great fit for us. And just one add-on. We just use the licensing add-on. And what that does is it enables EDD to have software licenses that can renew, and even better, it gives our website like an API endpoint that the plugin can go and hit to validate licenses. So just those two plugins on the website, and we've got like a full licensing system. We did write like one class, one bit of code to support that, and it was really lightweight. Another thing that we did, which again I think could be done more in WordPress, is how do you ship a freemium plugin? All right, so you have sort of three different models. One is you've got the free version of the plugin, and then you buy the pro, and then you deactivate the free version, upload the pro version, and activate it. All right, so that works well, except for a couple of problems. One is you've got two code bases that you've got to manage, and that's difficult, right? And the other problem is that it's a bad user experience, right? Your user has to go find your website, download the plugin, go back to their WordPress install, upload it again, delete the other one. It's just not a great user experience. Would you agree? So maybe we can make it a bit easier. What we'll do instead is we've got the premium version. We'll just extend the premium version with the free version with the premium features. So it's a smaller code base maybe, and it sort of sits on top of the free code base, extends it like any other add-on would, and we'll ship that separately. But now you've got this problem of people still have to go and download the premium version, and now they've got two plugins active in their WordPress install. And that's not, I know a couple of plugins that do that, and it's kind of annoying, don't you think? Is it just me? Like I just don't like having that extra. And so what we chose to do is we actually ship all of the premium features with the free version. They all ship as one. It's just one plugin. And what that allows us to do is we have like an admin screen. You can type in your code that you get from the website, hit activate, and you've instantly got the pro version. all right? No other plugin installing or uploading or anything like that. Now, the downside is that it's really easy to hack. Anybody can come in and go, we literally have a method in like the main plugin class that just is pro, and it returns true or false, right? So if you wanted to, you can just, it's very easy to find. We didn't try and hide it or that one, we didn't try and hide it. And you can just return true at the top of that method, and you'll have pro. All right, that's the downside. It's true. But also, all of the other plugins, they're on the GPL websites, they're on the nulled website. You can go to GitHub and search and find the pro versions of any plugin you want if you really want to, if you're interested in that. And when you do, you'll get an old version. And with this method that I'm suggesting, as soon as your plugin updates, and it will receive updates, you'll be back to your code base will reset, and you'll be back to the free version. So it's a trade-off, but it's a trade-off that I'm okay with. When are you talking, man? Have I missed your talk?
It's the new one.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I think that model, it works really nicely. We trust our users, of course, and the other benefit is that anyone can come along and contribute on GitHub to the free or the premium version very easily, and we don't have to sort of port their pull request to another repo or anything like that. So it makes it a lot easier for us. So that's that. All right, so I've told you about how we went about launching a custom, a freemium plugin in the course of about 9 to 10 months, and it's doing really, really well. And I hope that some of these ideas will help you, focusing on product, place, and people before you start on your product idea, making sure you've got those key pieces in place. Trying to find the right team is really important. You want these 3 key roles of a sales, marketing, technical lead, and a product designer or a product manager, with a good amount of overlap between those roles. Of course, if the people on the team get along nicely, that's a bonus. And then you've got this early access model that happens a lot in the sort of gaming world, but I've not seen in WordPress, and I think could work really nicely. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. I hope that there was something valuable there, and I'd like to take any questions. We'll go up front.
Thanks a lot for that talk. It was really informative. Just curious, have you reached a year now? I remember roughly early when you were coming out, but you've passed a year and people have continued on with your...
Yeah, so we launched early access in February. We launched the prototype in November. So yeah, we'll probably hit the year anniversary without realizing it at some point. Yeah.
Congratulations, but I was just curious whether you had passed the year from the early access. So are you seeing people resubscribe?
We haven't passed the year. Part of this, actually, I'm glad you brought it up, is what we did with the early access is we said to our customers, we will reset your subscription. It was the 1st of September, because we must have launched Pro just before then. So what we did for all of our customers who backed us in early access, we said, whether you backed us in February, March, or in August, your subscription will reset on the 1st of September 2020. So we sort of gave them that a little bit of extra leeway. So we're waiting for that point before we see the resubscription numbers coming through. One thing about the early access model that I think has been really interesting is that during this 6 months here, we had a conversion rate. So I'm measuring active installs on WordPress.org, and I'm measuring sales, okay? We had a conversion rate of around 6%, which is super high. Right? Most plugins are doing 2 to 3%, maybe less. and we were at 6% during that early access phase. It's hard to say exactly why, but I think it's got something to do with that lifetime discount, and sort of you're selling more than just the product. You're sort of selling the dream. You're sort of selling, this is our idea, invest in us, believe in us, and I think that contributes to a higher conversion rate. I'll go over here, just to, otherwise I might forget the sides.
The plugin directory has a rule something along the lines, you can't have any disabled functionality in a plugin. How do you get around that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We've come across that particular sort of, what's it called, section of the guidelines, and that is a particular reading of it that could come up. I have read that and sort of feel like our plugin fits within the guidelines, as that's my interpretation. At the end of the day, I figure we're entrepreneurs, right? We're startup people. We ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So if that comes up in the future, and it may well do, then we'll change models. It won't be hard to do though, because the way that we've built the plugin is very modular, and it'll be easy to switch that out.
Fantastic talk. Thank you, Luke. Can I ask you about pricing? It seems to be a sort of mystery, I think, for many plugin owners. I know we've tried pricing anywhere between $49 and $3.99, and both work very well. And for me, I know I prefer to have a few number of high-paying customers rather than lots of low-paying. What sort of thought went into your pricing strategy?
Yeah, great question. Of course, it depends on what your product is. Depends how much value you're providing. Depends how business critical what you're doing is. Generally, I think plugins are underpriced for the most part. I don't know if you saw, but ACF recently moved to a yearly subscription, which I think is a fantastic idea for Elliot. Is Elliot at WordCamp Sydney, by the way? No? Okay. Well, if you're watching this, hi, Elliot. I think it was a really good move. Yearly subscription, I think, is really important. Otherwise, you're going to have support burdens down the track. And I think most customers understand that. Certainly when ACF moved, a lot of the feedback on Twitter was very, very positive. And I think for a lot of agencies, they like to know that something is going to be around in the future. For a lot of businesses, they want to know that they're investing their entire workflow into something that's going to be around in the long term. So I think it's better to have a subscription than not. I think it's more valuable to people. In terms of how much to price, we went with like a single site, 5-site, unlimited sites model. That's, I don't know, it's too soon to tell you how well it's working, because actually I think like 90% are single sites. And we chose the $99 price point, and we're just sort of experimenting with that. I don't have a better answer, unfortunately.
How do you handle support? Which one of you in your
That's a good question.
Zen Who does the
Let's
support?
look at the Zen Ven. All right. So one thing that I didn't talk about, that I mean, we could make a whole new section here. Let's make it. That's just so important. I don't know, what's it look like? It looks something like a, you got to dog food. You've got to be dog fooding your plugin. And do you know what that means? It means you've got to be using it yourself all the time. And for us, this was such a valuable tool because we got to use it in other work situations. So like our marketing guy Rob, he's got another job where he's using Block Lab every single day. And so he's dog fooding the product. He's eating his own dog food. And so when it comes to support, I think it sort of falls into the same category. If you've got like this core founder team, every single one of the three of you should be contributing to support, and that's what we do. So we do support in two ways. We channel one through Help Scout, and channel two is on WordPress.org. And as soon as we see something come up, one of the three of us will just jump in and answer it. As you know, we're in different time zones, some of the time, and we'll just jump in as soon as we see anything. And luckily we built our product with like very, very little technical debt. We're very like passionate about coding standards, all the rest of it. And so we get maybe like 2 support topics a week. So it's definitely easy to handle. It's definitely something to consider when you're starting something new. You've got to think that if you're outsourcing your development overseas, and a lot of people choose to do that, a lot of the time you'll end up with a product that's subpar in terms of like the coding standards, in terms of its accessibility, things like that. And that has its own cost, all right? So down the track, you're gonna have to refactor. If you wanna add a new feature, it's gonna take longer, and your support burden is gonna be much higher, okay? So that was a really important thing for us, is to have a solid plugin core foundation. And so because of that, we don't get much support, and the three of us jump in and answer support ourselves. And what that allows us to do is go, oh, there is a bug. I can actually fix that really quickly because I'm a developer. Or, that is an interesting use case I'd not thought before. I'm the product designer, and now I can take that type of user into account. And all sorts of benefits from doing support yourself. One day, as we grow, maybe we need to outsource some of that first level stuff. But I'll probably leave that later, as late as possible. Do we have time for more questions? Or
has anyone got another question? This will be the last one.
Thanks, Luke.
You're welcome.
Question about you prototyping quite early. Is that because, I don't know if it's technically proving, but you had the technical expertise to do so, and you jumped the wireframing?
Yeah, we absolutely jumped wireframing. We jumped design. We jumped all of that, all right? Hopefully whatever you're doing, you've got someone with a technical lead. And hopefully, like in our case, there's quite a lot of overlap here between the product designer and the technical. And so what that meant was that I could work really closely with that technical person over the course of 1 week, where we sort of really focused in. And I could say, oh, let's move that over here, and I think this is going to fit better. And it's not necessarily planning it all out in advance, but having a bit of an idea as you go. It's just rough, right? The prototype isn't supposed to look pretty. And the reason why it's better, I think, to do it that way is because when you're wireframing, sometimes it can be nice, especially for a new feature as opposed to like a whole new product, but you're not considering all of the use cases if it's just one person. So as a product designer, I prefer to like let lots of people use my product and go, oh, that doesn't work, or we need to move this section over here, or this is taking up too much space, people don't use that, and sort of start to use that information as opposed to just try and, so I make my best decision, we do it on the fly, but I'm not attached to it. Hopefully that answers your question. Totally skipped the design phase.
All right. Would everyone like to thank Luke for his amazing presentation? Just a reminder that he'll be out at 11 o'clock in the coffee, whatever little area down the end of the corridor for a hallway session if you want to catch up and start your own business in a plugin.
Can I just say also that That's not to say we don't do any design at all. Like, especially for this phase when we're adding new features, we spend a lot of time in design and wireframing, and we do it in GitHub issues. We get our community involved. We've got a Slack, and we start sending our early access pass holders, hey, what do you think about this way or that way? But just for this prototype is where I skip design, because it's all about time. Because you want to get to that prototype and go, you know what, this isn't going to work. You don't want to spend heaps of time on it. So yeah, design's important. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear, but not so much in that first week. Sorry.
That's okay. You're allowed to talk. We're just going to change over, and we're going to have George in here, and I'm sure there's something else on the other one, but my phone won't stay on the schedule, so I don't know. Anyway, everyone, thank Luke. Welcome, George. Just... 2 of this morning. Sorry about the technical delay. The passwords are always special. I'd like to welcome George Pappas to the stage. George is the director of an award-winning digital creative agency, G Squared. He works with brands including Coca-Cola and Mattel, BOSI, both the New South Wales and federal governments, Bunnings, and more. George is a lover of all things WordPress and is excited to present one particular case study that has reshaped his thinking on client collaboration. This is about the Healthy Baker, flipping the brief. Not the Baker plugin that I thought he was going to be talking about, but you know.
Thank you.
Over to George.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, guys. All right, so today's talk, it's not overly technical, so perhaps a break from some of the other technical talks that you guys have been listening to so far. Instead, it's a little bit anecdotal. It's less of a case study, I guess, more of an insight into one particular project we worked on halfway through last year and this year for a flour brand called the Healthy Baker. I guess just some key sort of takeaways I hope from today will be how we work with our clients and how that's kind of being reshaped as we move into more of an agile environment if we haven't already. And two, the client's brief isn't always correct, right? So they're the kind of two key takeaways, hopefully, from today. All right, let me just get this started. Whoop. So by way of introduction, I'm from an agency called G Squared. We're headquartered here around the corner, actually, on Riley Street in Darlow. We've also got an office in Brisbane. I started the agency about 5 years ago with another guy called George, which is why we've got this lame name now, G Squared. There's always that awkward start of a meeting where if it's just me or if the other George has come along with me, it's like, did you call it G Squared because there's two Georges? They're like, yeah, it's pretty awkward. Anyway, so we're now a team of 35, as I said, most of which are here in Darlow. We don't just do web. Web's a big part of the agency, I guess, for us. Like a lot of you, if you are digital thinkers, web's normally like an entry point. And then from there, we have some sort of complementary or supplementary services like paid media, content, all that kind of stuff. Our web team, even though we say we're platform agnostic, we're kind of 98% WordPress. Naturally, the briefs normally fit it, but also, we find it's the easiest system to work with. As I said, I'm not technical, so ignore the lack of technical talk, jargon, and so on in this talk, but I do come from a UX UI background, so that's the sort of lens that I'm looking at this through. All right, just a quick show of hands. Does anyone recognize the logo? Okay, a few of you. I always hope this experiment doesn't go wrong. Does anyone recognize the product? Hands up if you recognize the product. Okay, thank God. There's more of you that recognize the product. So we were approached by this brand, Healthy Baker. They're run by this big Australian agribusiness called Manildra Group. They're a $3 billion company, and they have one digital person. Which quite often is the case for us all when we're dealing with clients, particularly ones in fast-moving consumer goods or in retail or whatever. So the Healthy Baker, they approached us with a particular brief. This brief was the Healthy Baker's website was a piece of crap. It was very old. It was running. It was running, I think, off some sort of custom system. And the brief initially was, we want to move to a more, this one digital person and the board of Manildra Group were thinking, we need to move to an e-commerce model, which was the brief. So we want an e-commerce solution built. They didn't have any platform preference, but we want to start moving boxes online, basically, was the whole premise of the brief. So when we approached the brief, obviously we responded to it, ended up winning it, but we never really gave much thought to the e-commerce element because naturally we didn't feel that the brief actually fit the solution. So what the experiment that I just ran with you with the comparing of the logo and the product was a key insight that we drew from some research that we did. So moving forward, the assumed issue was that the website wasn't moving boxes. The research that we conducted found that fundamentally it was a brand and product challenge, not necessarily one that had to tie in with some sort of business results like moving boxes. I mean, we all do the normal grocery purchase. Would you ever, in isolation, buy flour online, for instance, right? I'm going to go get the milk, the eggs. I'm not going to buy flour at Woolies because I'll go home and do that online. Like, it was quite a big jump to make, right? To think that I'm going to go buy flour online. But this was the brief, and a good client of ours still work together, but that was their assumed issue. And you can tell, I mean, we've all worked, particularly when we're working with bigger brands, that the message, well, the brief normally comes from the top, or the assumed issue, that everyone else is selling online. Why can't we sell online? We need to sell more online. Digital's not making us money. So that was the assumed issue. What we found, though, in our discovery, so after various workshops that we ran with both internal and external stakeholders, we found that the issue was very different. And the discovery process that we undertook involved, obviously your normal kind of UX approach, user persona definition, better understanding the needs and requirements, developing user flows and maps to address the issues. Now, the problem was there was a very big requirement for this to be fixed scope, fixed fee, like the complete opposite of Agile, right? So it was a difficult one for us because the brief didn't match the solution, but at the same time we had to come in with fixed scope, fixed fee. So what we ended up doing was doing a big chunk of work at the start that involved these stakeholder workshops and research and so on. So following all of that and all the work that we did in the initial stages, we found that the issue was very different. The issue instead was that the product had great shelf recognition, call it, because it's in Woolies, Coles and so on. So great shelf recognition, but the brand had very low awareness and very low brand equity. In fact, when the Healthy Baker contacted us, and I was responding and doing the kind of pre-sale stuff, I didn't recognise the brand, but then when I went home, I realised that I had the Healthy Baker flour in my pantry. So that fundamentally shows that, like, the issue there, right? Like, I was talking to them and then I went home and go, shit, there it is. Yeah, well, that's Healthy Baker. I know that flour brand. But so no one recognised the name, no one recognised the brand, but we all recognised the product, which is a testament to their product teams and a testament to the fact that it's the only reusable plastic container and so on in the flour aisle, but very low brand equity. So that's why we call this talk flipping the brief, because we flipped the brief. We went back to the client and said, even though it's a bigger project for us and it's going to be more revenue, the project's going to probably be more enjoyable from a technical standpoint, this should not be an e-commerce solution. In fact, it should be the opposite. It should be an engagement-first, content-driven solution that moves away from, like CRO tactics and all that kind of stuff to move boxes. Instead, we should be looking to drive engagement. So why push boxes online when the problem is brand awareness? Fundamentally, that's the way we came to. So the research that we conducted actually drove a couple of key insights. And I mean, this project wasn't some huge budget UX project either. It was done on the smell of an oily rag, and therefore the research that we had to do had to be quite lean. But the research drove some key insights, and it's very easy to do, and I'm sure that you guys have done it in some projects that you've been involved with too. But we just created a survey, sent it out to a couple of sample customers, and then the sample size ended up being about 40 or so customers, and these are the insights that it drove. So 93% of people were more likely to utilise a brand or commercially driven website if it had resourceful content. It's pretty obvious. 88% of people confirmed that they actively search for and review recipes online. Again, I think even if we made that assumption without the data, it's an assumption we would all probably draw. And 91% of people view a recipe in meal planning and print, share, and save it for later. And that was probably one of the most critical insights, because instead of thinking about this solution as an on-the-spot solution or a stand-up versus a sit-down journey or whatever it might be, this is something that's happening before mealtime. So it's happening the evening before the morning of mealtime. So it's quite a considered journey. In fact, your common user in Australia is browsing between 4 to 6 recipe publishers at the same time. So, I mean, it's the kind of normal journey, right? I think the stat now is users are browsing in multi-tabbed environments, users are browsing between 5 and 7 tabs simultaneously because of the normal search journey. Open a new tab, open a new tab, open a new tab, open a new tab, and then browse. Users are doing that same thing with recipes. So that fundamentally meant for us that we had to make sure that this system, through both the UX and the UI, popped and ensured that it didn't look like your normal recipe portal with ingredients on the left and activity on the right, or steps on the right. The last key statistic that was driven from this research is that 78% of people are more likely to engage with the recipe when there's increased visuals and increased visual cues and interactivity. We looked at things like micro interactivity, looked at things like animations to help drive what would be kind of traditional look and feel for a recipe. As I said, ingredients on the left, steps on the right. So as I mentioned, though, that research drove two critical decisions that we brought into the project. One, that the system needs to pop from a UI perspective, and two, we needed to build really easy click-to-print and click-to-share functionality. That, of course, driven from the insight that people are viewing and engaging with recipe portals during meal planning, which is morning of or night before the meal. So, this is something that I came up with one of our designers, and then the rest of the team had to deliver and implement this, and they hated me for it. But the team had to deep etch 378 actual ingredient assets. So what we built into the WordPress system using ACF was the ability for the client, when uploading their recipes, to type in a particular ingredient, say it's eggs, with like a sort of presumptive search kind of functionality. It comes up, click it, and then automatically in that recipe, it will present it in this visually appeasing way. So what we had to do was first consolidate all the recipes, all Australian recipes on the internet, and create a list of the main ingredients that are being used. That ended up being 380 or so ingredients. Then, as I said, our team deep etched these visuals to build it into the system to allow the client to easily create recipes, but also the user to have that more visually stimulating experience, to allow the recipe portal to pop based on our research, and so on. So that was one of the first things that we did, one of the first decisions that we made from a UI perspective. And then we had to look at adaptive journeys, because it was actually inconclusive when we, normally it's like, do we design mobile or desktop first? And it's normally decision driven by, Google Analytics or other data that's supplementary. But this one, it was inconclusive, because a lot of the time people are browsing recipes during what we call a stand-up journey. So stand-up journey meaning on a portable device, but not a considered portable device journey, a stand-up journey. So they're on the train, or they're walking to work, or they're doing whatever, because we're all time poor and you're frantically trying to plan meal time. And so people are normally doing this in a stand-up journey. But there was overwhelming statistics that showed us that there was a desktop-heavy audience at a particular time. So at night, the data showed that recipe websites and their old website was being used in a more non-portable device environment. So we couldn't really there was no actionable insight to drive a key decision in how we started the design process. So we had to really implement adaptive design here. So you'll see, if you look at the system, that there are particular elements that have been added and removed to suit not just a broad portable device journey, but a segmented portable device journey. So mobile, bigger mobile, tablet, and so on. So the main thing to utilise to recognise is that the website, for the most part, utilises a one-column grid as a tip of the hat, I guess, to this more adaptive environment, to allow us to add and remove elements quite easily. But it also is, as I mentioned before, that very visually appeasing style of UI. That's just a kind of snapshot of that adaptive environment. Another key or critical user interface decision that was made was that we wanted to make the experience feel like you're in the kitchen. Again, we all have almost a nostalgic attachment to meals, sharing a meal, and particularly our own meals in our own homes, in particular our own kitchen. So the more that we could try to replicate that feeling, the more sense of attachment these people will start feeling toward the brand, the more stickiness the website would therefore have, the increase of lift in brand equity subsequently. So this whole kitchen bench environment, which you'll see if you visit the website, and I think I've got a sample of it on the next slide, assets and elements kind of slide in and out as you're scrolling, and almost as you're kind of scrolling down a kitchen bench. I think this is, yes, I think this is a sample. Yeah, so this is kind of what I was talking about before. You're almost scrolling down the kitchen bench as the flour trail, almost like, breadcrumbing your journey. And we ran this really unique test for our 3 months post-launch. We used a lot of iconography as buttons instead of text as buttons. And it was a decision that we didn't base on any key actionable insight. Instead, it was something quite similar to the last speaker. We wanted to trial and learn based on letting the data drive the strategy. So those pluses that we used as buttons, we split tested a bit of micro interactivity behind them. We split tested a subtle pulse, and to the naked eye, it wouldn't be at all visible. It might be if you're, if you've got a keen eye or you're a UI designer, but to the naked eye, generally, it wasn't so obvious. So we ran a split test, pulsing button against a non-pulsing button for 3 months. The lift on the pulsing button was a 24% increase in click-through rate on those buttons. So that, it enters that school of thought again around, what we call like the red button theory. So if I put a red button here at the front and it says, do not press this button, we'd all feel inclined to press the button. And because with digital, there's a unique lack of tangibility with digital, right? We can't touch, we can't feel it. So we have this innate urge, this almost primal urge to touch, feel, and anywhere that there's movement, we want to see what it does. So that red button theory came to life in this particular experiment and other experiments that we ran with this project and others, in that when there is some sort of micro interactivity, whether it's subtle pulsing, whether it's a particular call to action wobbling, whatever it might be, we all have this almost subconscious feel and this urge to interact with those elements. And that was brought to life here in the pulsing buttons, but in other things that we did too. Now, this is the most surprising part. Now, that bounce rate, I know, seems ridiculous. There was actual business results that were tied back to all that work that we did, the initial UX work, and then through to the implementation through the UX and UI theory, and obviously the front-end development. Users remained relatively similar. There was no paid launch here, so this was all organic, basically. Page views increased, the pages per session increased, which means obviously the engagement with the website, people are viewing more recipes, was increased, and the average session duration was increased by over 30 seconds. Now, the bounce rate isn't below 1% right now. I think it's at 9 or 11%. But for the first 4 weeks we were running this data, the returning visitor rate was quite high. I think it was about 60 or 70% returning visitors, because generally, if you're buying the Healthy Baker product, people are generally quite loyal to their fast-moving consumer good or equivalent items. So for the most part, it was people returning that had already engaged with the previous solution. So for them, it was like, whoa, look at this. What's going on here? So they engaged with the website, and the bounce rate was 99 out of 100 users were actually progressing through further than the homepage. As I said, it's not at that rate now, but that came down from an 80% bounce rate previously. Now, in closing, I think there's a couple of key things that we took away from this, and it's potentially something that we can all discuss together as the WordPress community and wider digital community. But had this project been approached initially in that more agile environment, right? If we had that process of discovery together, we helped them build the brief, we helped them build what they thought was the ideal end outcome, we wouldn't have come to that kind of reverse briefing or flipping the brief process, right? So when we came in, we pitched, we won the job, we went in, we go, all right, guys, first thing, we need to run some workshops, because I don't know why you think you need to move flour online. It's not going to happen. As I said, people in isolation aren't going to go and buy flour online. And then go to Woolies and get their eggs and milk. So the key thought process that it evoked internally for us was, if we just went in with that pure play agile methodology, and we ran that discovery initially, would we have had this kind of process, which in some ways in client agency relations, quite an awkward thing to do, to push back in that way. Like, this big function that you guys thought was the breadwinner, ignore the pun, was not at all viable and probably won't be worth the investment for you. So if we approach it with that more agile methodology initially, I think we would have avoided the problem. So it has created a little bit more of an agile first way of thinking for us. But the awkward part is every client, particularly ones that aren't so digital first, have this appetite for fixed scope, fixed fee, fixed brief, and there you go. So it's something that I'm keen to learn more about, as well as I chat to you guys hopefully more today, is how do we grapple away from this awkward hybrid methodology that we all seem to be in, where we're still testing early, we're still operating in pseudo sprints, but normally do a fixed scope or fixed fee. So they're my closing remarks. I'm happy to take Any questions, if there are any? Yep.
Did they have a lift in sales? Simply, did they have a lift in sales?
Yeah, it's a good question, and they did. They did, but we can't attribute that solely to the new digital solution. But they had, I think it was a 3% lift in sales across their major retailers, so Woolies and Coles. Attributable to a little bit of a brand tweak that they did as well at the same time, but I think partly as well to the digital solution, which we ended up, which is also a key insight, driving online and offline together. We had them change the packaging slightly to push the recipe portal as well. So, we could start engaging a lot of their existing customers and creating that brand, that web stickiness to lift brand equity. But yeah, there was a general lift in sales. I'm not sure how much we can attribute to the digital solution, but there was.
How would you approach like your smaller business with the same approach when they're so adamant in their minds that this is the way I want it, and you actually sit down with them, you go through it and you go, we need to sit through a website strategy session for you, but they go, no, I just need a website. Like, there's this sort of pushback that comes, oh, I just need this, I need that, and you come down to, what do you want to actually get out of your website? What do you actually want it to do? What's your business like?
Yeah.
Trying to convert that customer over to what they actually need. But it sounds like that's what you've just done.
Yeah, I think the important thing, and we often get into the habit of it when dealing with clients, is like the sample size of one argument. So when we start saying, I think, or this is the best way to do it, I think the client automatically puts up their barriers and thinks, why do you know my business any better than me? So I think what we did here is we just let the data drive the solution, right? So we took a step back and we just said, this is what the data's telling us to do. It would be remiss of us to ignore it. It's the most dangerous thing we can all do is the sample size of one. I tell my team, and me particularly in dealing with clients, is that we can never really look at my story. We can't speak anecdotally. We need to let the data drive the strategy. So there's a common thing that always happens with my clients is that we do a bit of work in sort of children's products, whether it's financial products or otherwise, and a lot of the time, some of the clients will say, well, my daughter likes this, and my daughter didn't really like this part of the product. And that's a very dangerous way to be approaching anything, particularly digitally, particularly in digital with the diverse user personas that are likely using your website or solution. So yeah, normally we just let the data drive the strategy. So we just put the data in the middle of the table, said the conclusions that we can draw from this should be black and white, and normally there's no argument after that. But I take your point, it is very difficult. It's a very big barrier or hurdle to overcome when dealing with clients, in that they'll always say, I know the business, I know the market, I know my clients, customers better than you. Why is this new approach that you're suggesting any better than our current one, or whatever it is? But yeah, data driving the strategy is normally the answer.
Thank you. I can just imagine that data research at the start would have a significant impact on the budget of the project, and there'd be a lot of people who would kind of balk at that at the start. I'm guessing that you've got a certain target market that can afford that, but for certain people who are at the lower end, which is I think kind of where we were coming from, where it's very hard to start providing that sort of data. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, well, we don't just, these guys didn't have a big budget, and that's the user work that we do with the bigger brands would be that example where there was a big budget allocated to it and so on. This was on the smell of an oily rag. So here we ran one workshop, which is inexpensive, particularly if you only want to allocate 1 or 2 people on your side, and sometimes just one. Like sometimes I just run workshops to bring the cost down. And also we created a survey and also got the client involved. We said, share this out to some of your sample clients and customers. And normally it's as easy as that. Even with our sort of smaller projects that we're dealing with, we still need some sort of data. When the data's inconclusive, if we've run GA and Hotjar for a bit and still say, oh, there's some parts we probably need to get some maybe qual data on, we'll create a survey monkey very easily and get the client to drive it. Get the client to send it to their customers and clients. But yeah, of course I take your point that it's not always available, particularly with clients. They'll balk at the cost of research and go, we don't need research, what do you need? Just design and build a bloody website, So, but a lot of the time we need, if you want the website to be foolproof and last a test of time, websites nowadays are getting redone every 3 years. You want it to last 5 years plus. You need to let the data drive that. And yeah, it's as simple as creating a survey, getting the client to drive it out. That's normally what I find. And we have a lot of clients that would balk at the cost of research, and normally I just cost that into the design. I won't have it as a separate line item because they'll say, take that out. That can save us $3,000, whatever, you know, so yeah.
Thank you. Excellent.
We've got time for plenty more questions if anyone's got any.
I know I'm probably not your average age group who's going to go online and order your flower, but I've been to a website where it's got the animation button and the oh, by the way, these dots you can scroll, and I really appreciate that initially. It's like, oh yes, thank you for helping me get orientated. But do you actually provide something on your website where people can just click and say, okay, enough now? Because the animation actually drives some of us away from the website.
It's a very good point. And again, it's not something there's no hard and fast rule with that, particularly that, you know, that red button theory where we, you know, generally speaking, and it's a broad generalisation, people do have an appetite or an urge to engage with things that are animated. It comes down to, again, letting the data drive the strategy. We had some other parts that were animated on their About Us page. We had a very big immersive, like, not illustrated, but animated experience. It's telling their story from paddock to plate, because they're farmers, from the paddock all the way through to your plate. And we found that there was a very low engagement on that page. So we dropped a lot of the animation on that particular page. So it's about, you know, letting the learnings drive the evolution of the solution. But for the most part, yeah, the answer is not always micro animations and interactivity. It's dependent on what the end goal is. But also there's that balancing act we need to make between animations and nice UI and good front end development and accessibility and the particular standards we need to adhere to from an accessibility standpoint. A lot of the time there's contrast errors, there's a lot of other accessibility errors that come with running good animations and so on. So we need to, I think, it's a balancing act and it's a difficult one. Project specific, I think, is the answer, and letting the data drive the evolution. If it's not working, drop it quickly, do something different.
So once you got them on the animation, how did you actually drive them to the product page and get more sales?
So, I mean, that was the point was that we didn't do that. Yeah, so the point was that we weren't, there's a product page, it's more informational, but I guess it was more subliminal than anything else. Every recipe is using a Healthy Baker product. So every single recipe that people are clicking, sharing, printing, using that night or the next day is using a Healthy Baker product. So we didn't have to sell. This principle's accurate in a lot of cases where if you provide resource, it will normally end up in some sort of business goal, whether that's lifting sales or whatever else. We're providing free content that includes the Healthy Baker as a product. Generally, that lifts, that will lift their product sales by virtue of the fact that people will be buying that to include in that recipe. So yeah, the initial brief was how we need you to get people to our product page to transact, and our reverse brief was we need to do the opposite of that. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, how long does it take from the brief, initial brief until the finished product? And what is the most difficult part of the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. This whole thing from initial client consultation, reverse briefing, all the way through to the end, I think was 3 months. That was actually quite lean and quite quick relative to other projects that we've done of a similar capacity. The most difficult part, I think, was the initial stages. It was really, it almost got heated at some stages with the client because it came from a board level, right? Think about this big Australian family-owned business from a board level, wanting to have a particular way that this system works, and they wanted to transact, but ultimately that's not the right approach. How do you tiptoe around that without upsetting people? So that was probably the most difficult part for us. Once we got that operational rhythm, people understood that there's data that's backing up what we're saying. From then on, it was pretty smooth. But yeah, that initial stage, no doubt about it, was the difficult part. It's good exercise.
Hey, George.
Did you have to do any SEO to get the recipes to rank, or was it just sort of natural? And what if the recipes just never ranked?
Yeah, it's another good question. I think there's two parts to the answer. One, the initial strategy wasn't so reliant on inbound, so on search inbound or any other inbound channel. It was more reliant on engaging existing customers. They had a big amount of customers that weren't engaging with the brand, so the first challenge was getting existing customers to engage. The second part to it was there was SEO work involved. We've got a sister agency that's an SEO agency, and they were involved in the implementation. So they did things like changed the recipe headings to be a little bit more like long-term search friendly. They obviously did some work with the metadata to make sure that it was compliant and easily indexed by Google Spiders and so on. But yeah, it wasn't like a search first launch strategy for them. It was more about how do we engage. Like they're selling thousands of flour containers a day. How do we engage those people first? Then second to that, how can we look at an inbound strategy? So for them, they did do the foundational work from a search perspective, things like changing the recipe titles to be long tail friendly and so on. But for them, it was more about their existing customers first.
Hey George, thanks for the talk. I'm just intrigued a little bit about the workshop that you said you sometimes run.
Yep.
What did that involve, and who was there, and what kind of stuff to talk about, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, good question. Workshops for us there's no cookie cutter rule or approach or agenda. So normally, and actually when we first started running workshops about 3 years ago, it was quite a daunting experience because you think you need to be some, qualified workshop or activity planner. But for the most part, it can be three parts for us. First is about users and objectives, and it's a really easy exercise. You get sticky notes, get everyone in the room to write their users who they think will be using the website. Normally there's a lot of consistency amongst them, and you put them on the wall and group them together. Then you get them all to attach an objective to that user. Then you attach them you attach the sticky note to the other sticky note, so there's a user and objective. That's the first part of the exercise. The second part is generally on project specifics. We can start wireframing together. We can start doing all that kind of stuff. And the third part is miscellaneous. So the third part is dependent on the project. If it's a large project from a technical perspective, there's a bit allocated at the end to talk about functionality, how we want it to work, how we want it to interface to client, how we want it to interface to user. So yeah, but every workshop that we run has a different agenda. There's no hard and fast rule. The main thing is, what we've learned is when we don't have a workshop or the availability to workshop with clients, if they're overseas or if they don't have availability, we find that the solution, the design process and development process and review takes a lot longer because there's a lot of grey areas, there's a lot of things that weren't discussed. So yeah, and in terms of who's involved, we run a day of workshops with some clients where we have to involve different people just because you don't want your marketing team with your sales team because sometimes sales might be speaking different language to marketing or advertising. But for the most part, it's normally some sort of either ownership or high-level stakeholder, and then anyone that's in marketing or digital team. So we've run workshops as small as 3 or 4 people, some as big as 20. Yeah.
This will be the last question, and then we're going to morning tea. Yay!
Hi, George. Thanks for the talk.
Thanks.
It's sort of related to the SEO question, and I understand that clients won't always tell you which other agencies they're working with or if they've carried out any other activity. But do you know if anything else happened around the launch of the site?
I know that they launched a brand tweak. So the Healthy Baker logo, which you would have seen in the slides, that it got a bit of a facelift. That coinciding with the packaging, a rebrand of the packaging, coinciding with us including a shout out to the recipe portal on the packaging. I think that was the main driver. They did work with a brand agency who we worked collaboratively with. This is the other thing to note. Like sometimes in agency world, and that's my world, and it might not be everyone's world here, but sometimes in agency world, we're a little bit scared of collaborating with other agencies, particularly when there's competing services. Our lesson that we've learned over the past few years is that the more you collaborate, the more likely it is you'll all keep the work, rather than trying to kind of be the lead agency. it's an older school of thought that there's a lead agency and then the rest of the agencies, whether it's search, copywriting, whatever, report to the lead agency. That's how they used to do it in the old advertising days. I don't think that's the case anymore for us. I think we're more collaborators and partners in a project. But yeah, we worked with a brand agency, and that's who was helping us bring to life the recipe solution on the packaging. And I think they had one other agency that was involved just doing some paid stuff for them, but it was more above the line, more traditional media.
Yeah, so, that was my question. So was there TV, was there retail promotions, or they not really told you?
More point of sale. So it was more, they worked with Woolies and Coles and stuff to bring to life shelf activations and that kind of stuff. But they did that the whole way through. That wasn't to coincide with the launch. Yep. So that remained quite constant through. But yeah, there were other agencies involved, certainly, and we collaborated and partnered with them on the project.
Thank you.
I'd like to get everyone to clap, George.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks. I'll be around as well for the next couple of hours if anyone wants to have a yarn. Thanks a lot.
And we're back at 11:05 after morning tea. I'm not sure where morning tea is being served, but you'll find it. There'll be food. You can find coffee. It'll be great. Have fun.